So good day, everyone, and thank you very much for joining our very first podcast on Explorer channel. As you all know, what we do here, it's all about Africa. We talk about geostrategic relationship of African nations with the Western world, and where we feel something is going wrong, and we would tackle that. As we always say on this channel, we are only going to tell our own story. So, as an Ed Explorer channel, we are serving as one of the voices of Africa on the global channel. And it's a beautiful thing. We've started this journey for a very long time, and we are just even getting started with over 50,000 subscribers on our channel. We feel we are doing a great thing with more people to subscribe later in the future. So, without wasting much of our time, folks, today we will be speaking about a very important topic vis-a-vis the relationship of the U.S. and South Africa, African leaders visiting the United States of America and Washington D.C., where some people have even called that job interviews for some president of the African continent. Some even call it is very disgraceful for African leaders to travel all the way from their nation, abandoning their domestic responsibility, and go over to the United States of America to have a meeting with the Trump government. So today I won't be talking alone. We'll be having a seasoned geopolitical analyst, brilliant analyst, I would say, per se. I'm learning from. I'm talking about no other person from Mr. Fabian, someone who has been talking about geopolitics for over a decade now. He's been doing it brilliantly with a lot of brilliant analysis videos on our channel. You can pick up to watch anytime, any day. A very, very disciplined individual. It's going to be a pleasure to be hearing from him today. So, Mr. Fabian, I'd like to welcome you on this live podcast.
Thank you, Farouk. Thanks for having me. Appreciate your time and greetings to fellow viewers. It's always nice to have you all on board. And I think we're going to be having a very interesting conversation today to put things into context from the African own perspective. We say it as it is, and we'll continue to tell our story from the strategic point of view. So thanks for having me, Farouk.
Yeah, you're very much welcome, Mr. Fabian. So, okay.
That has
Okay,
to do
so
with economic development.
so just like I've done the introduction about you, about being
Liberia
a
has a
seasoned
lot of
geopolitical
minerals,
analyst,
and
I would like to hear your
another thing we
insights
asked
about what some
the
people
good
have
friends a
called
long time is
uh,
the
presidents of African nations going to the US to have job interviews. What do you have to say about it? Is it disrespectful to African continent for African leaders to travel all the way from the African continent all the way to the White House to have a meeting with Donald Trump? Is it disrespectful? Is it normal for African leaders to do this? Is it shameful, or it is a normal thing they should do, or they are getting a paycheck from Donald Trump administration? So I would like to hear your insights. What do you think about this?
Thanks for having me, Farouk. I think it's always good for countries to have geostrategic partnership and engagement from a whole lot of areas,
Okay.
economic, from the trade aspects, from the support in terms of agriculture, knowledge sharing, counterterrorism, a whole lot of other very important relationship building from a whole full different sectors. So the thing is, Africa would not operate in isolation like any other continent around the world, but the relationship
Okay.
is from the equal perspective, and this is where African countries have refused to lie low from this particular geo partnership that we are seeing at the moment. So the United States of America, not just the Trump administration, has always considered Africa not to be a very strategic region. So this particular meeting that we saw, Joe Biden had the same meeting, Barack Obama previously, and you will think that the relationship is moving to the right direction. But most recently, you see that what happened in the United States of America, of course, Donald Trump has the right to invite African leaders, is basically a divide and rule tactics where a few leaders were picked, and I would say that handpicked and brought to the United States of America just to be
Hello.
embarrassed, to be talking about, to be embarrassed openly in the global media. I think that was embarrassing from the geostrategic point of view, where the leader of the country of Liberia was being questioned upon his language in terms of his English skills. And you have the president of Gabon, who later on came back to his country to shamefully wear the heart of the Make America Great Again. Is to tell you that this meeting, though considered to an extent from the strategic relationship point of view to look at trade, but it was embarrassing because you have other underlying issues that came, like the United States of America asking African leaders to take immigrants from different countries, like from Mexico, asking them to basically accept people from different countries. So from the surface, the meeting was from the strategic engagement, whether it's trade or whatever the United States want to call it. But if you look at what happens or what transpired, countries like Mauritania, they were talking about different things, like these countries have their own internal issues and they cannot accept migrants from the United States. So the meeting, instead of looking from the trade point of view or trade standpoint, it turns to be something else. And this is the problem, that African countries look at the relationship between the United States of America to be one-sided. And more importantly, you've seen other countries across the region that were not at this particular meeting, like the country of Sudan, South Sudan, to the point out, have come under tremendous pressure from the United States of America. So the meeting with the president of the United States of America alongside other African leaders was a meeting that we will continue to see that in the international environment. But again, for them to come in there and then a different agenda is ruled, then there is a question in regards to the United States of America and African relationship.
Okay, wow. That's been a very insightful response there from a strategic point of view. And I'd like to ask you another question just before we go from here. Um, you said, in summary, are you saying for African nation to go to the US, even though this has been a normal practice, it has happened in past administration, Obama, Biden. So are you saying this is a normal thing that should be done and should be welcome all the time? Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is that Africa should engage international partners, whether it's the Russians or Chinese or whatever countries, the Middle Eastern partners, um, Turkey, an awful lot of other strategic partners. India, we work on a trade basis and more collaborative aspect. But if the partnership is meant to hit an agenda, to talk about things which are not relevant, so not going to be helpful for the continent. For example, everyone knew that this leader went there to talk about trade and investment, how the United States can make huge impact in the countries of Senegal, Gabon, Mauritania, and the rest. But if we start hearing that these leaders were about to be, they were being lectured upon, being embarrassed publicly, so leaders in the continent won't want to do that, and they don't like that particular environment because the Chinese don't do that to them, the Russians don't do that to them. So this is a big problem for the continent in terms of the image, and the nationals across the continent of Africa don't like to see, irrespective of what you think about the leaders of the region, they don't like to see their president being embarrassed publicly, and that is not a good thing for the United States of America's image in terms of the strategic or the soft power mood, if you would consider that, in the United States of America's relationship with Africa, considering the China and Russia are heavily involved in the continent at the moment. So the U.S. Should revise its approach on how it looks at these particular meetings, not from the condescending perspective. That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay, that's very insightful and that's a very good one there. So the very next question I'm going to be asking you now is, what do you think of U.S. relationship with South Africa now that South Africa is a member of BRICS? So do you think the relationship between the South Africa and the US might be a wash? And what do you think from a strategic point of view What do you think this can cost South Africa between the relationship they have with Russia? Do you understand my question?
Yeah, I understand. I mean, South Africa, it's irrespective of your position with South Africa, it's one of the most important nation in the continent of Africa from the geostrategic point of view, the largest economy in the region. After Nigeria, Nigeria was before, but now we have South Africa. South Africa is one of the most advanced technologically in the region, and then most American companies are located in the country of South Africa. And this country is a member of BRICS, and one of the founding members. So to put it in that place, we had other founding members. The South Africa joined, and South Africa's relationship with Russia and China is not going anywhere soon. But this country has come under tremendous pressure from the United States of America over the years. They are being told on what to do, influence in a number of ways, and the South African government is pushing back in several ways. So the relationship is not looking good at the moment, and it's not looking good in the past administration, in Joe Biden, or in the Trump administration at the moment. So we've seen the African Growth and Opportunity Act, so to put it, most people know as AGOA. We've talked about it on this channel over and over. This is an important trade agreement between countries of the sub-Saharan African region and also the United States of America. So South Africa was benefiting from this, but the United States of Americans, administrators, and a number of congressmen have always asked South Africa to be sanctioned because of the country's own foreign policy. We've seen the war between in Gaza and Israel, and how South Africa took the United States ally, which is Israel, to the International Criminal Court. So these have caused a lot of issues between these two nations. So you can imagine where this thing is coming from. So there is no smoke. There's no fire without there's no smoke without fire, as they say it, right? So this is a issue the United States of America is trying to, like I would say, silence South Africa, because if you can silence the largest economy in the continent, the most powerful country from the African continent perspective, which is South Africa, talking about member of BRICS, looking at it, a very loud voice that it has in the global community, whether it's in the United Nations, then you will be able to silence the continent of Africa. So this is where the problem lies.
Let me ask you some strategic question about BRICS. You know, their motive is to overturn the unipolar world to a multipolar world, right? So, in your own perspective, saying from the countries that we have the likes of Brazil, Russia, China, India, and all of them. So, do you think their motive is achievable from strategic point of view, or do you think the West can fight back, or the US can fight back and still maintain the status quo of the unipolar world? So, do you think their motive and objective is realizable?
No, I think the world has moved, has advanced. The United States of America and other geopolitical partners across the European Union, they have refused to move with the world because, like Africans always saying that African solutions for African problem, and at this moment there are wars raging in Sudan. Looking at what's happening in the Congo and between Rwanda and the M23, all of these issues. So at this time, it comes at a point where Africa is at the crossroad and the continent needs solutions on a whole lot of things. The United States cannot provide the strategic solution that African countries are looking for. So we got to have new players across the board, whether it is in trade, whether it is economic partnership, whether it's in an investment. Because if you look at the international multilateral institutions, the United Nations, the IMF, and the International Monetary Fund, or World Bank, whatever you want to call them, these organizations were formed before even Africa became independent. Most countries in the continent became independent. So they cannot actually articulate their own particular concern, because if you look at the borrowing rate, we've seen the president of Kenya talk about this over and over, that Africans borrow at a certain percentage as compared to other countries around the world. So this cannot continue because most countries across the continent of Africa, Nigeria, Botswana, Ghana, most recently, they are paying a huge percentage of their particular GDP to service their foreign debts. So if you continue to, if you're making $100 million a year and you are paying $45 million, of which this money should be going to healthcare development, education, agriculture, advancement, research, then it means you have to look for alternative organizations where, like China and the rest. I'm not saying China is perfect or is wonderful. They have their own fault, but the BRICS is providing an alternative in terms of the financing opportunities here. And the United States and its partners can no longer, talking about global north nations, can no longer provide the guidance or the solutions that African countries are looking for at this stage. So there must be the decentralization of powers to enable other countries to function properly.
Okay. I'll draw some questions from your response there. I like your response. It's very, very insightful. So, I've read online, and there are some reports that indicate that monetary lending institutions like IMF and World Bank, that even though the whole media, or can I say maybe the Western media, is carrying it as though they are doing this, African nations.
Sorry, guys, I think we've lost Farouk there. Farouk should be joining us. You face your
Yeah,
question.
so yeah, I was saying, you talked about monetary lending institution like IMF and the World Bank. So I said I read online, and some people are saying that these institutions, even though the Western media report them as doing favors to African nations by lending them money, loaning them some money with some percentage of interest, some people are saying it is not as exactly as it seems on the Western media. Some are saying these loans have their rules and regulations, have some policies that are not favorable to the continent of Africa. What perspective are you saying this? Because like the recent one that I read, some say like the World Bank or the IMF loaning policy is that once they loan you money, uh, the interest of the money is so big that you might not even be able to pay it, let alone paying the full debt. And some say that once this institution lends you money, you have to restructure your economy, some of which are like devaluation of your currency, and some policies some citizens of this African nation doesn't find favorable. So, what do you think about this whole thing? What they're saying, is it correct? Are these monetary institutions, are they doing the African nations favor, or they are doing otherwise? What can you say about it?
Well, Farouk, I think it is something where I haven't read that, but I think what I also think is that African countries don't borrow on equal rates with their other global North partners, or in particular interest rate. If you look at Ghana, for example, there are some restrictions or some particular conditions that comes with regards to borrowing. Of course, if you borrow money, there's a certain percentage that you need to not things like you have to cut in terms of your spending. There are things you need to cut up to make sure that, like you see, to African countries, some take measures like they reduce travel abroad, unnecessary travel for ministers, cut spending on education, channel the money to other particularly, just cut some pox like unnecessary benefits to ministers and other delegations across the country, right? Just to stick alongside what the IMF or the World Bank asks them to do. But the interest rates are always very high. African countries are owing more money to their global north, I would say the multilateral institutions, World Bank, IMF, and all these other organizations, than they owe to China. So these loans are not always very transparent and clear. So people don't really know exactly what percentage until the African countries are feeling the pinch. That's when they start coming up and screaming that this is what is going on. So bottom line here is that irrespective of what people think, the borrowing conditions are not favorable to a number of African countries that are already struggling at the moment. So this is a problem regards to this relationship. So African countries, like the Kenyan leader always say that We want to borrow in an equal footing, and we want to make sure that our the percentage that we pay is reasonable, basically. So for that reason, that African countries can no longer continue paying this high interest rate, they are looking out for China and other alternative funding to keep their economies running.
So it's been a very, very insightful session with you. And just before you go, I'd like to ask you this last question.
Yeah.
Fine, you say African nations are trying to look out other strategic partner like China, India, and all of that to, maybe find alternative to the Western affiliation. There have also been some reports, maybe from the Western media, saying that China is putting African nations in debt trap, in sense that they are doing um, physical projects like building bridges, roads, and all of that for African nations, which the African continent are welcoming. So, what can you say about it? Is it actually a debt trap game that China is playing with African nation, or it is a 50-50 favorable condition affiliations that they're having together? What can you say about it?
The thing is, Africa is tired of all this back and forth. Like I said, China is not 100%, but the continent of Africa at the moment needs roads, bridges, waterways, airports, seaports, development. China has constructed hundreds of kilometers of railways across the
Roads,
region.
railways.
And more importantly, they have built a number of airport dams and huge investment in billions of US dollars that the United States of America cannot even dream of. The European Union partners cannot even dream of. So the loans, of course, it goes back to why African leaders and government must be responsible. They must be fiscally responsible in terms of the financial aspect, how they make use of this money. What they do with it is important because other global partners are watching them very closely and they will tap into that. But in terms of the benefits of this relationship, it's been fundamentally useful for the continent of Africa. You look at countries like Kenya, the Standard Gauge Railway across Central Africa, you can huge projects, the stadiums that were built, the waterway, the airport in Senegal, a wonderful lot of projects that their global North partners can only dreaming of. And China is not basically a country or a partner that you will say that they have their faults, they fall short in a number of areas, but China has delivered over and over, irrespective of your position. And China has the Belt and Road Initiative, have shamed Western nations who refused to invest in Africa in an extent. You look at the relationship between the country of France and that of countries across the continent of Africa, was a disgrace. Very shameful in terms of their particular relationship, lack of investment, lack of collaboration, honest partnership, exploitation of uranium in the countries across the Sahel region. So if China is coming in with the huge financing opportunities to do business, the case of Zambia was an exceptional situation, but it goes back on both sides. China is bringing the funding. African countries too must be responsible on how they use the money. By just having money and then spending it foolishly, it's not going to help them to basically make that argument. So the Western media will criticize that China's putting African into debt trap, but China, these countries are owing more money to the multilateral institutions like World Bank and the other organizations than they owe to China. So it's a geopolitical situation. You will always hear this conversation come up, but Africa need infrastructure at this time. The continent must grow. The continent must be connected. If the continent of Africa is not connected properly, look at travel costs across the region. It's extremely expensive as compared to what is in the European Union and across China and across the United States of America. Africans don't trade among themselves because you can't travel freely in the continent of Africa because the cost is extremely high. This is a problem, and this comes with the connectivity. Once Africa is connected properly, once there's road to go to South Africa, you live in Namibia, you go to Nigeria, you live in Nigeria, to go to the RC Congo with trains, then the African continental free trade can be realized to an extent. So let's stop fooling ourselves that listening to Western media's or criticism will change anything. No, it's not going to change anything. Africa just continue to do what they are doing, but must be fiscal responsible. They must make sure they're making use of their money to avoid putting future generation into unnecessary debt.
Okay, thank you very, very much. It's been very nice to have you. Just like I said earlier,
Thank you.
it's been a very, very insightful session with you, Mr. Fabian,
Yeah.
and we are very glad to have you on this live broadcast. And to you guys that joined us on this live broadcast, I'm sure it's been a very insightful session for you too, and you love what you just watched. We are happy you're here, and next time we'd love to have you for more insightful session with me and with some other guests next time. So it's so much nice to have you here. Until next time, I am Farouk Adiri. See you once again.
Thank you very much, Farouk. It's a pleasure speaking with you. And I'll be looking forward to joining your show again. Have a good day. Bye bye.
All right, bye bye.